Welcome to my channel, The Binge Eating Therapist. I'm Sarah, former binge eater turned psychotherapist, and my mission, if you don't know it by now, is to use this space to bring content to you to help you understand your struggle with food and break free from binge eating. Today's video is going to be all about that not being able to feel satisfied with food. This is a common experience for anyone who's been struggling with disordered eating, in and out of the diet mentality, binge eating, and it can feel like you are losing your mind, like that you are eating and no matter how much you eat, it doesn't feel like enough. So there's 5 things that I want to share with you today. I don't know why it's always 5 things, but my videos just tend to be 5 things. I promise you I don't just get to 5 and go, that's enough. Don't know why that's important. 5 things that I want to share with you today about what might be getting in your way when it comes to feeling satisfied and what you can actually do about it. So number 1 is I think a lot of people feel dissatisfied by their eating because they're not eating what they really want. They're eating what they think they should. We all live in this diet culture saturated by these messages about what we should and shouldn't be eating and how much of it. Here in the UK, restaurants now have to put calorie quantities on menus, which may lead you to looking at a menu thinking, oh, that's what I really want, and then seeing how high the calories are and thinking that you should go for the lower calorie option. So what you wanted, you felt like you shouldn't have. And it's that, there's often that social media post you see in one guise or another where it says, you want chocolate, so you eat 10 apples, a protein bar, yogurt, all these other things. And then the other side of it is, you want chocolate, you have chocolate, you feel satisfied, and you move on. So it's this idea of, can we start to trust what we really want? Now that's difficult when you're experiencing binge urges because you think that you want these particular foods because you've got this urge to binge on them. And so when you let yourself have them, you just binge and you still don't feel satisfied. But really coming back and asking yourself the question in the moment, rather than what is it I want to eat, asking yourself, what would be the most satisfying choice right now? You're not always going to get a perfect answer. You're not always going to get it right. But if you start holding this in mind when you're making your choices, because ultimately, don't we want to feel satisfied? It feels pretty good. So if you're making it a priority in your decision-making process, rather than saying, what should I eat? What shouldn't I eat? What would be the most satisfying choice? And allowing any answer to be a viable consideration, that would be a helpful place to start. Then I also see people feeling confused because they'll say, I'm eating enough, I'm full, and I'm still feeling like I want to eat more. So it's worth having a look at the amount of energy you are actually consuming. So it's a very common scenario. You go all day trying to eat as little as possible, and then it comes to the evening and you have a meal or something in the evening, you feel full, but you don't feel satisfied. And that can feel like a really conflicting place because now your body doesn't feel comfortable. And because you feel so full, if you're struggling with body image and like fear of your body getting bigger, it can feel like your body's got bigger just in the space of half an hour, as opposed to actually you're just quite full. You may think, I don't understand why I am still hungry or still wanting food when I am full. Well, our brains are monitoring how much we're eating, not just in the moment, but over hours, days, weeks, and months, which is quite often why when people go on a diet for several months, they feel driven to eat and eat and eat quite often until their bodies are back to where they were, if not even higher. The body wants an insurance policy to protect itself against future famine because that's how it is experiencing it. And the other thing that I'm sure many of you have done as well is trying to almost trick your body into feeling full. So it might be having lots of food that's a high volume but quite low in energy density. A lot of diet foods would fall into this category. Things like rice cakes that are puffed full of air. You eat them and you feel kind of full, but you don't really feel satisfied. Even salad and fruits and vegetables can feel like this if you aren't getting enough of the complex carbohydrates, the fats and proteins as well. You really need to just have a look at the amount of food you're eating and the variety of foods that you're eating as well, and trying to be as honest with yourself as you can. Because I've seen so many of us would convince, I did it, I convinced myself, I was like, no, this is enough for me. One meal that I used to have quite a lot when I was really struggling with my disordered eating was pesto salmon with steamed vegetables. And it was a big plate of food. and I always felt full afterwards, and I always really enjoyed it as well. It was a tasty meal for me. And in the moment it would satisfy me, but then quite soon afterwards I would feel like I wanted something more. And actually during my recovery, when I added in some potato to the meal, adding in something that was just more carbohydrate heavy, I found that I did feel satisfied, and I felt satisfied for longer. So having a look at the amounts is also crucial, and trying to be as honest as you can. This is a difficult one to do because we've got so much conditioning and messaging going on in our bodies, maybe, but in our brains about what it is we should be eating. And thirdly, to think about timings. So if you are bouncing from one thing to another, this was me, I'd be trying to fast and then I was binging, and I would go through long periods of time where I wasn't really having proper meals. My eating schedule was all over the place. And what I've learned since then is actually if you eat at similar times every day, breakfast, lunch and dinner, your body's chemistry, your ghrelin, hunger hormone, starts to sync up with your meal times. So you will naturally start to feel hungry at those times. So when you eat and your ghrelin is synced up with your eating schedule, you are likely to feel satisfied more often. This doesn't need to turn into a rule or something to scare yourself with, that, oh, I have to eat the same time every day, and if I end up eating at a different time, I'm going to throw all of this out. This is just information that could be useful to you. You don't need to apply it in a black and white way. It's not even something you have to do. It might be that you work shifts and you just can't make your meal times at the same time. But if it's something you can do, and to have a little bit more structure to your eating, it calms your brain down. It calms your body down. It knows when to expect food. You are reassuring yourself that food is readily available. And if this is something you are able to incorporate, you are getting your biology on side to help support you in what it is you're trying to do. And the fourth one, which is probably my favorite, is around expectations. So when you are expecting to feel a certain way around food and then you don't, that's jarring. So if you expect something to satisfy you and it doesn't, that can feel like you've got it wrong. You shouldn't still want more food. You've had enough. All those judgments start up. And if you haven't seen my video called Are Your Beliefs Making You Hungry? I will link to it below. I'll put a card above and I'll put it on the end of the video, where I talk about that experiment, that what people believed they were about to consume affected their biology when they consumed it, even if they were not consuming as much as they thought they were consuming. Yeah, that's right. In summary, what it means is what we expect, anticipate and believe, our bodies and brains also anticipate, and our biology can anticipate as well. And on the expectations front as well, I think certainly in the recovery community, there's this sort of emphasis on feeling satisfied and finding your satisfaction, that I really thought for me intuitive eating was about finding a way to feel satisfied every time I ate. So when I didn't feel satisfied, I would feel a bit stressed. I would feel like I wasn't getting it right, and I would feel like I wanted more. And this can be especially challenging if you deal with things like hormonal hungers, which is something I am intimately familiar with. There can be this kind of hormonal hunger that cannot seem to be satisfied. So another thing that I needed to learn was how to, I say tolerate, but I think it's more than tolerate, accept feeling dissatisfied around food sometimes. Because I used to just think that was such a problem, because it had been in the past. And what I would often find is if I'd had a binge or a few days of binging, and I went into a day where I didn't binge, if I'd been binging, on the next day food was much less satisfying. It didn't matter what I ate, it was just less satisfying. So during my recovery, when my binges were getting fewer and fewer, and I was resetting quicker after a binge, one of the things I would say to myself is, I know that tomorrow or today, food is going to feel less satisfying. It's going to feel a bit uncomfortable when I eat. It's going to feel like I want something more. How I understand this is that binge foods can be very stimulating. They're stimulating your brain chemistry, they're stimulating taste buds. Obviously this depends on the kind of binge foods that you're binging on. I know people binge on all kinds of food, but for me it was normally foods that were higher in sugar. So when I'd been eating a lot of these foods and then made that switch to eating less of those foods, it didn't feel as satisfying. But it went away after about a day. And as long as I went into it consciously looking out and knowing I was going to feel unsatisfied, It was okay, I could tolerate it. It was just a little bit of discomfort, and I didn't make it mean that something had gone wrong or I'm supposed to feel satisfied, and the fact that I'm not means something. But tolerating feeling dissatisfied will not work if you're trying to restrict, because at some point it will catch up with you. But there are other reasons why we might feel unsatisfied that's not about restriction. And the last point that I wanted to talk about was distraction. So I was at a barbecue a few weeks ago with all therapists, and I got chatting to a really interesting woman who was a cyber psychologist and researcher. And she was telling me that more and more kids are starting school who are not potty trained, they're not toilet trained, they're still in nappies. And so her conclusions about this is around the role of technology and how much time we spend plugged into technology and less aware of what's going on in our bodies. Now, I don't know if that's happening to the kids, but I do know that we live in a society, we live in a kind of the way a lot of our lives are set up. We spend so much time plugged into television, internet, work, whatever it might be. How much time do you spend doing anything that involves being connected with your body? I think this is partly why the joyful movement part is so helpful with intuitive eating. It's not necessarily about exercise or the physical benefits of that, but that's all very well and good. But it's also something that involves experiencing your body. And so how often do you eat when you are not distracted or doing something else? When you're not on your phone, on the telly, on work? Yeah, why not? Or driving your car. Now, what people often do when I ask them or talk about this idea of distractions is they get very all or nothing about it. And then they think, oh, I just have to eat mindfully and chew my food 30 times and, be tuned in 100% all the time. And if my mind wanders, somehow I've messed up and I'm not doing it right. I often say to people, how can you just be 10% more present when you eat? I eat in front of the telly, and sometimes I eat and just eat. And having the combination and being able to switch between both, I think is really important. That slowing down and paying attention. If we're not paying attention when we're eating, that is going to make satisfaction further away. If we want to give ourselves the best chance of feeling satisfied, then we're going to need to connect a bit more to our bodies and the experience of eating itself. So in summary, look at the shoulds. What is it you're telling yourself you should be eating, and how can you give yourself permission to step outside of that? Consider the amount of food that you're eating and the variety. If you're restricting or trying to get away with eating as little as possible, that is also going to down-regulate those satiety signals. Timings of food and eating regularly can really support you in finding more satisfaction with food. Considering your expectations, what it is that you are expecting and anticipating will affect your experience. And consider how you might reduce distractions. And I'm sorry, I'm ridiculously proud of this mnemonic that I came up with. I'm all about the mnemonics lately, but yes, the mnemonic is satiated. You're welcome. See you on the next video.